Hello, good evening, and welcome to Ohio Stadium, the home of the football team that will be #1 at the end of this college season. Whether you are joining us here at Ohio Stadium or perhaps virtually at one of our watch parties in Cleveland or Cincinnati, or even from your home via Facebook live stream, thank you for joining us. Today, we gather here to discuss a topic that is crucial to the well-being of our community, the future of Social Security. It is my distinct honor to introduce the new State Director for AARP Ohio, Jenny Carlson. Jenny brings over 3 decades of experience in federal and state government and government affairs. Her career has been dedicated to advocating for the most vulnerable citizens and driving policies that make Ohio a great place to work, live, and age. Jenny's journey includes significant roles, such as the Assistant Director of the Ohio Department of Aging, where she managed operations and developed innovative programs to improve the health and safety of older Ohioans. She also served as Associate Vice President for Government Affairs at the Ohio State University Office of Health Sciences, managing policy and government relations for the health system. Jenny's leadership is characterized by her deep expertise and strong relationships, which are essential to achieving AARP's goals. Her commitment to caregiving, housing, and health security, financial resilience, and personal fulfillment for older Ohioans is unwavering. As a family caregiver herself, Jenny's dedication to AARP's mission is both professional and personal. As the AARP State Director, Jenny leads the advocacy, communications, and community outreach efforts that serve all Ohioans aged 50 and older, including 1.5 million AARP members and their families. She leads a dedicated team of staff and volunteers, like myself, committed to improve the lives of older Ohioans. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jenny Carlson.
All right, it wouldn't be an event at Ohio State if I didn't start out as saying, OH! Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Claire, and thank you everyone for joining us virtually and here in person. I do want to spend a little bit of time in thanking people for coming out today. We have our Executive Council members who are with us today, spending time, so much time with us on a day-to-day basis, advising us on everything that we do. We have representatives from the Governor's Office, Kathleen Young, as well as Jason Hill, Shayla Davis from the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus Foundation, and then Greg Lawson, the Buckeye Institute. And I do want to recognize everyone who's watching us today. There are many members of Congress and their staff that are viewing this online. So thank you and welcome. For those of you who are with us, I hope you've enjoyed the evening so far. We choose today, the anniversary of Social Security program, to celebrate the milestone here at the iconic Ohio Stadium. I'm a proud alum and a huge Buckeye fan, so it was apropos to pick this location for tonight's discussion. The atmosphere is unmatched. We threw a party, a cake, we blew out the candles, maybe some, we have some more to do. But cake aside, we're also thrilled to include you in an important conversation about the future of Social Security. As the state director of AARP, one of the most gratifying parts of my role is helping to fulfill our mission. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 or older to choose how they live as they age. We advocate for what matters most to the more than 100 million members, Americans, 50 plus, and their family. That's health, personal fulfillment, and financial security. And we're going to spend a little bit more time this evening talking about financial security. Tonight, we've gathered the nation's leading policy experts from each end of the political spectrum to get some of the most questions and start to unpack and understand what's the solution, what does it look like, how do we protect the Social Security, what could it look like moving forward. The fact is, Americans pay into and earn their Social Security, and Social Security is guaranteed for life. So, a retiree will never outlive is a vital income. And by vital, I want to share with you that in our recent voter poll, 55% of Ohio voters age 50 plus say that Social Security is or will be a major source of income for their household. Social Security is paid for by dedicated payroll taxes and the interest income those taxes have built up in the Social Security Trust Fund. But the program faces a long financial shortfall. If Congress fails to act, the money from the incoming payroll taxes would only be enough to support 83% of the benefits. So let me say that in another way. If Congress doesn't take action in the coming years to protect and save Social Security, benefits could be cut at about 20%. That's over the next decade. I recently heard someone describe the impact of a 20% cut as the difference to be able to spoil your grandchildren or having to move in with your grandchildren. So think about that. We do know without that, millions of retiring Americans rely on Social Security benefits. They have worked a lifetime, paid into the program, and expect it to be there when they retire. In fact, our 2024 voter poll found that 80% of older Ohio voters think that protecting Social Security is extremely important or very important as an issue when deciding their vote in November. We think that's worthy for consideration, especially in a critical election year like this year. So there is a fun fact. Ohio residents aged 50 and older make up an outsized portion of the electorate, with consistently higher voter turnout rates compared to younger voters. In both the 2020 election and the 2022 midterm election, our Ohio voters made up 56% and 65% respectively. And that's out of all Ohio voters. So our poll shows that 89% of Ohio voters aged 50 and older say that they're extremely motivated to cast a ballot this year. So they're motivated and they're taking issue with how candidates are talking about Social Security. As Ohio continues to navigate the evolving landscape of social and political economic challenges of rapidly aging populations, the future of Social Security remains a critical topic. In light of recent discussions on economic stability and the well-being of our aging population, and as debates around the federal budget allocations and reforms intensify, it's critical for Ohioans to know about potential changes and their implications. So I would encourage you to visit AARP's Ohio 2024 Election Guide. That's at www.aarp.org/ohvotes. Not only will you find the latest information around deadlines and where to vote, information is there so that you are best prepared when you go to the polls. This is one way that AARP helps Ohio's most motivated and consistent voting group stay informed. I would now like to introduce our moderator, someone who has made a significant impact in the world of journalism and beyond. Robyn Haynes is from NBC4, which is a local news station here in Columbus. Robyn has more than 20 years of experience in TV and has been with NBC4 since 2012. First a reporter and now a host of Daytime Columbus, Robyn loves to be the conduit for other people's stories, and she's great at it. She understands the importance of educating viewers on issues that impact their daily lives. Robyn is also a breast cancer survivor and is a passionate individual sharing her own stories to raise awareness for other young women. Born and raised in the Buckeye State, Robyn is a proud graduate of Ohio University E.W. Scripps School of Journalism. So please extend a warm welcome to Robyn.
I had to wear the Bobcat green. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of red in this room, okay? You gotta break it up. So thank you to Jenny, of course. I'm thrilled to be here to moderate really this critical conversation. And I say that because I'm 42. I'm very happy to tell people my age. I know I might be a few years away from Social Security, but that doesn't mean I'm not worried about it being there when I get to that point in my life. I also have two parents who are currently on Social Security, and my mom is a caregiver for my father. He suffered a very freak accident, had a spinal cord injury about a year ago, so they rely very heavily on their Social Security income to pay for mounting medical bills, as so many people face as they age. So we know this is a vital program. We know it needs all the attention that it can get. And as Jenny has outlined, Ohio really is at a pivotal moment, right? There are recent reports that highlight the state's aging population and the reliance on Social Security, of course, for a majority of their income in retirement. So I want to share with you some key facts, and these deal with Ohio, right? Because that's what we here in this room care about. More than 1 in 5 Ohio residents, which is 2.4 million people, receive Social Security benefits. Now, of those, the largest group is retired workers, right? People who have earned this, who have paid into this for decades. That's 71% of those who get these benefits. The rest receive spouse or survivor benefits or maybe disability benefits. But this is something, too, that has pulled Ohioans out of poverty. And sometimes we forget about that fact. In fact, just from 2020 to 2022, in a 2-year span, 42% of the state's residents in this age group were lifted out of poverty. They would otherwise be below that line if they were not receiving Social Security benefits. That number falls to 9.3, okay, when Social Security is included. So that's a big gap. Nationally, the program lifted 16.5 million people, 65 and over, out of poverty. It was at 38%. That brings it down to just 10%. Annual Social Security benefits to Ohioans pump more than $44 billion into our state's economy. It's a big number. $33 billion paid annually to those receiving retirement benefits and their eligible family members. $6 billion then through the survivors, almost that much then through the disability program. We know that when somebody gets their retirement benefits, they're also going to be buying goods, supporting local businesses, right? Doing all these amazing things to help uplift our community with those dollars. So we need to make sure it is there. It is there for everyone for decades to come. And of course, the result to all of that is more jobs, more income, more business, a better place to live, right? So we have a lot to consider tonight. So I am very happy. We have two incredible, distinguished policy experts that we are going to chat with tonight. So I'm going to introduce them before they come up and start our conversation. First, we have Romina Boccia. Romina is a leading fiscal economist, and she's the Director of Budget and Entitlement Policy at the Cato Institute, which is in Washington, D.C. She's advised presidents, members of Congress on Social Security policy for more than a decade. She has testified before the Social Security Board of Advisors. And back in 2016, AARP held a Social Security Solutions Tour, and Romina was a part of that, a featured expert. And she writes weekly on Substack at the Debt Dispatch, is also the author of a forthcoming book, so write this down so you can get this, Social Security, A Global Perspective. Romina is also an elected member of the National Academy of Social Insurance. So, Romina, we are happy to have you. We also have with us tonight Max Richtman. He is one of the nation's leading advocates for Social Security and Medicare and a prominent expert on seniors issues. He's served as president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare since 2011. Max is a former staff director of the Senate Special Committee on Aging, a 16-year veteran of Capitol Hill, which deserves an award in itself, we all know. Max has testified before House and Senate committees, provided expert commentary on CNN, C-SPAN, Fox, MSNBC, CBS, and NPR, among others. And his writings on senior issues have been published in Newsweek, The Washington Post, The Hill, CNN.com, among others there as well. So we know that Max knows a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight. In fact, just last year, Max appeared at a series of town halls around the country that was in part co-presented by AARP to educate the public about the importance of Social Security. So I want to welcome them both. We are honored to have your voices come on up, speaking with us tonight. I do want to mention to everybody, you probably saw a note card on your chair when you sat down. If at this point or any point throughout the discussion you think of a question that you would like to ask, feel free to write it on that card. We'll collect them. If you raise your hand, a volunteer can come and grab it from you, or after I'm done asking a few questions, we can kind of pause and take those, because we want you to have your questions answered as well. We try, though, to make them more broad, focused on policy changes, right? Nothing very, very specific that they can't answer. But be sure to pick those up, write your questions. You have our undivided attention tonight, so this is the chance. All right, so I am going to start. My mic might come on. I am going to pose questions to both of our experts today, but ladies first, okay, Max? I'm going to start with Romina. So to begin our conversation tonight, Romina, share some background on what is projected to happen with Social Security over the next decade. And we talk about this in relation to demographic shifts, the aging population, declining birth rates, right? People aren't having as many children as far as a population is concerned. So how does that impact the solvency of Social Security? Can you tell us that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Robyn, and thank you to AARP Ohio for inviting me on this very important topic. Excited to be here. So over the next decade, but really over the next 9 years, because we're talking 2033, when the so-called trust fund is supposed to be depleted, over this time period, Social Security will face increasing financial pressures, as you mentioned, due to demographic shifts, which is primarily the aging of the population, declining birth rates, which affects the number of workers who are paying payroll taxes, and also, this is often overlooked, rising benefit generosity. Benefits have actually become more generous over time for new beneficiaries. As you are well aware, your benefits grow with inflation if you're already on Social Security, but people who are applying for new benefits, those benefits have become more generous over time. And all of these things are affecting the solvency of the program. One thing that is often overlooked too is that Social Security is a pay-as-you-go program. Another way to talk about this is it's a tax and transfer program. Today's workers, those of us who are still paying payroll taxes, actually fund today's retirees. This aspect of the program is often misunderstood. Now, it is true that Social Security at one point, between 1983 and 2009, collected about $3 trillion in additional taxes than was necessary to pay benefits over that time period. However, we also know that Congress didn't in fact set that money aside for future retirees. There's no saving happening in the program. There's no investments. There's only IOUs that the Treasury owes to Social Security. And what researchers have looked at is, what happened to that money? And they found that the government, US government, spent it through lower taxes and higher spending on other programs. And so right now, today, payroll taxes are no longer enough to pay current benefits. We've been running these so-called cash flow deficits, where Social Security actually adds to our national debt, since 2010. And my team and I have estimated that over the next 9 years, before Social Security runs out of borrowing authority, that's basically what those trust fund IOUs give Social Security, the authority to borrow. Over that time period, we will be adding more than $4 trillion to the national debt in order to be able to pay full Social Security benefits. So this is not just an issue for 2033. This is an issue today because we're already running deficits in the hundreds of billions of dollars, in addition to what workers are paying in payroll taxes. And then we're also facing a demographic double whammy. The baby boomer generation is retiring in large numbers, and they're living longer, God bless them, thanks to advances in healthcare and improving living standards. But that also means we're seeing a substantial increase in the number of Social Security beneficiaries from about 15% of our population to growing to 22% of our population. So this the number of beneficiaries is growing in absolute size as well. And then we're experiencing lower birth rates. Americans have decided they don't like to have as many children, or they can't afford them anymore. And immigration is helping some to help that gap, but not enough. And to put this into perspective, back in 1960s, there were about 5 workers for every Social Security beneficiary. Now we're down to below 3 workers, and we're heading to 2 workers having to shoulder the burden of every Social Security beneficiary over the next few decades. And so, as was mentioned earlier, the trustees are warning that payroll taxes will only be sufficient to cover about 80 cents on the dollar. And by 2033, Social Security won't be allowed to borrow anymore to cover that shortfall. And then there could be a 20% benefit cut. Obviously, that's something we all want to avoid because that would be an indiscriminate benefit cut, and most likely Congress would not allow that to happen. Now, what they most likely would do is just borrow more money. That's what they know to do best. But there might come a time where investors decide that we're no longer a good credit risk, and so we need to keep that in mind too. We should be fiscally responsible. And with that in mind, there are a number of reforms that we can consider, including adjusting the retirement age. But that only works if we have a robust disability program, because not everyone can work longer. Or modifying the benefit formula. There's actually only a very loose tie between what people paid in taxes and what they receive in benefits. So there's tweaks we can make there as well. Or rethinking how we finance the program, given that it relies on current workers and the number of workers is shrinking compared to the number of beneficiaries. Maybe we need to come up with a different way of financing this program that looks less like a, pardon me, Ponzi scheme. I think important, and I'll wrap up here, is that we must tackle Social Security sustainability in a way that preserves benefits for those who truly need them, but also protects the next generation from going bankrupt. And also, we want to make sure to keep the American dream alive for the next generation. Because, for example, if we raise the payroll tax to cover the shortfall, we would have to raise the median wage workers, who makes about $60,000 a year, would have to raise their payroll taxes to over $10,000 a year. A person making $60,000 would have to pay over $10,000 a year in payroll taxes. It would be an additional $3,000 to what they already pay, because they actually already face a fairly high payroll tax burden. That's really sizable. Many American families probably couldn't afford this. So keeping that in mind, we need to consider this issue with both a sense of urgency, but also empathy. The numbers seem very daunting and scary. We're also talking about real people impacted by what's happening to this program, whether they're on the working and paying taxes towards the program or on the receiving end of the program. We're talking about our parents, grandparents, children, ourselves. And so it's important that we have a very thoughtful and open-minded conversation that's informed by the facts, and that also considers the social contract that we would make today. Not the social contract we made 89 years ago when we had very different demographic and economic realities than we had today. I think we should have a conversation about what is fair in terms of the benefits that current retirees should receive, who should receive how much based on how many years they have worked and what other resources they might have available to them, and also what's fair to younger workers. What can we ask them to pay in order to preserve Social Security benefits for those who need it most? And importantly, let's not undermine economic opportunity for the next generation while we try to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Romina. Thank you. All right, now Max, I would like you to weigh in on the Ponzi scheme that is Social Security that we have just discussed. Tell us about your thoughts, some background on what's going to happen in the next decade.
Yeah. So how many of you are on Social Security? Okay, most people. How many of you think it's a Ponzi scheme? One. Two. One person. Or two.
I think Romina changed a couple minds just now. Yeah.
So you tell me how a program that's been around for 89 years, and let's celebrate. Today is the 89th birthday of Social Security, and whatever Romina and the Cato Institute, yes, let's applaud it. Think about Social Security. There isn't another federal program that has been around for 89 years, lifted all those people out of poverty that you talked about, that your state director talked about, paid everybody, all those tens of millions of people, all those years, 89 years, starting with Ida Mae Fuller, who got the first check of Social Security and lived to be 100 years old. How many programs have done that? Paid everybody all their benefits on time for 89 years. That is not the way a Ponzi scheme works. That is not a Ponzi scheme. And I've been on a lot of programs with Romina. Romina is a very nice person and a very smart person and very wrong when it comes to Social Security. Starting with calling it an entitlement. It's not an entitlement. I know her title at Cato is Director of Entitlement Policy. It's part of your title. Social Security is not in that portfolio. Social Security is an earned benefit. You all talked about it. It is an earned benefit paid for with each paycheck. And when I hear Romina talk about we have a problem, I wrote it down because I was so shocked. Rising benefit generosity. Anybody feel their benefits are too generous? Anybody feel that over the last, 12 years, we got a great COLA last year, 2 years ago. Because of the high inflation, the COLA was 6-7%. 8%. In 3 of the last 12 years, the COLA was 0. 0. Were you happy about that? No. And the reason it was 0 is that formula that is used to determine what the COLA is flawed. It measures inflation from the third quarter of one year to the third quarter of the next year based on how inflation is affecting a wage earner. That's an entirely different proposition than how inflation is affecting an older person. The COLA should measure inflation based on the kinds of things that a Social Security beneficiary, an older person, buys, and those goods and services, like health care, which way outstrips general inflation. And so the formula is flawed. There isn't a single person, I bet, maybe this gentleman here, who thinks it's a Ponzi scheme, who would say that Social Security benefits have a problem because of rising generosity. Most people would laugh at that. It is laughable. And, there are so many statistics to go through. Yes, people are living longer. Not everybody's living longer. I'm 77, so I'm very happy people are living longer. But, if you look at lifespan is very tied to class, to race. It's not everybody that's living longer. And just because you're living longer doesn't mean there's a job. for you. Or you can work longer. You know, Romina and I can probably do this for a long time, and you too, Robyn.
Yeah, I hope.
But, you know, if you're working in a factory, if you're a nurse standing all day, if you're working in physically demanding jobs, you can't work till you're 68, 69, 70. That is an absurd way to deal with what is admittedly, and I will talk about it, challenges to Social Security. And before I do that, I know I'll be quick here, but there are so many misunderstandings about Social Security. And despite all of that, 80–90% of people in this country, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, support Social Security, support expanding it, improving benefits, despite all these myths, like it's a Ponzi scheme, which it is not. You know, I know Romina said it kind of casually, all of these IOUs, these are not IOUs that the Social Security program has. When people pay in, workers, every paycheck, pay into Social Security, and their employer pays in. When that money exceeds what is needed to pay benefits, it goes into the trust fund. These are not funds that are backed by IOUs. This excess money, it's about what, $2.7, $2.8 trillion, is invested in government bonds. These are not IOUs with Romina's name or my name or Robyn's name. They're government bonds, and they have the same value and full faith and credit as the U.S. as any government bonds, as the U.S. government it has its faith and credit in its existence. So to say that these are IOUs or to talk about Ponzi schemes, that does not add anything to the discussion about the future of Social Security. I think it diminishes the discussion. So one last thing about how this works, and it is a little complicated. During COVID, we had all this unemployment. Less money was being paid in to the program than was needed to pay everybody full Social Security benefits. But during COVID, everybody got their benefits, even though not enough money came in payroll taxes to pay everybody's benefits. Why? Because these government bonds were there, they were cashed in, they earned interest, and actually the size of the trust fund grew during that time because of the interest put on these IOUs. They're not IOUs, they're government bonds. So, you know, I hope as we go on through this evening, you know, we can dispel some of these myths. It does not help to perpetuate falsehoods and myths about the Social Security program. There's no money there, a bunch of worthless IOUs. And the last thing, and how many of you people have been hearing, I know you hear it in Ohio as all over the country, Social Security is broke. You hear that? Bankrupt. It's not true. The only way Social Security can be bankrupt and broke is if we have 100% unemployment and there's no money going into the program. There will be a shortfall, as Romina accurately pointed out, in about 10 years, when not enough money will be coming in. These IOUs, these government bonds, will be cashed in, and we'll have to make some hard choices in terms of how to continue the solvency of the program, and I'll be glad to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, now that we talk about that gap that's almost 20%, right? Solvency means being paid your full benefits on time, and that's what we're striving to do. So Max, I want to point to you for this question because we know that it's going to be tough. We know there will need to be trade-offs, right, to fill that gap. So what do you see as the most likely changes? What do you think needs to pass and happen to secure that solvency?
Well, what I think has to happen is we've already had trade-offs. We've already raised the retirement age. It's already gone up from 65 to 67, and I talked about, I don't think we should look at that again. I don't think the focus should be on the benefits of Social Security. They're not generous, they're modest. You know, people are barely getting by on their Social Security, and to start reducing benefits, I think is wrong. What I would suggest, and there's legislation that would address this, is bring more revenue into the program in a fair way. How many of you know that there's a cap on wages subject to the payroll tax, right? Most people know that. About a third of you know that. A lot of people don't know that. It's $168,600 this year. I think that's right, $168,600. After that, no more payroll tax. Why? Why does it stop there? What I would like you to understand is that in 1983, the last time Congress made some major reforms of Social Security, about 90% of wages were covered by the FICA tax, the payroll tax. Because of the inequality in wages that we've experienced in the last 35, 40 years, it's about 80%. Because people at the top are making so much more money, they're not paying into Social Security. And you have less money going into the program. And I think that's, yes, lower birth rates, slightly higher levels of living longer. And it isn't 16 years. As someone that is 65 years old, it's about 4 or 5 years added to longevity since 1940. Half of that has been taken away and absorbed by the increase in the age for receiving benefits to 67 for almost everybody, will be everybody soon. So less money is being taken in because fewer people at the top are covered by Social Security payroll tax. So I don't see anything wrong with having an adjustment in the payroll tax. Our organization advocates for eliminating the payroll tax cap, so that people continue paying. Politically, that's probably not going to happen. It's not realistic. But there's legislation that we support that would keep the cap at what it is. It changes a little every year, as I said, but start collecting payroll taxes again for someone who's making $400,000 and above in wages. And maybe they have an adjustment in their benefit as well. You still bring in more money, address the solvency. What about other ways that people are being paid besides wages? A lot of people these days get their income in ways other than wages. What about looking at bringing some revenue in through those revenue streams? So trade-offs, I think we've been there.
Yeah.
We've been there, we've done that. It's time to bring some fairness into the program and even expand and improve some of the benefits.
Okay. All right, Romina, there's a lot to take in over the last 10 minutes or so. So when you talk about trade-offs, what is it that you propose would make a difference, would really make this program stick around?
Yeah, I think it's important that we take a more holistic approach to Social Security. All that we've done so far is very minor tweaks. Max alluded to some of them when the last time Congress made reforms in 1983, which was 40 years ago. A lot has changed in 40 years. And what do I mean by a more holistic look? Well, Social Security is supposed to be a social insurance program. What should be the goals of that social insurance program? And then if we can settle on those, how can we accomplish those? And I think that the most important goal is the promise that Roosevelt made with Social Security, which is to keep people out of poverty in old age. And we've moved very far from that original intent of the program. Benefits have become extremely generous for the highest income earners. And I think we should reduce benefits for the highest income earners. Few people are aware that a dual earner household where both spouses make the Social Security maximum because they had high incomes throughout their lifetimes, they can collect today more than $117,000 annually from Social Security. I would be curious if anyone in this room gets more than $100,000 from Social Security a month. Like, we're not talking about reducing benefits for people who are relying on those benefits for their livelihood. We're not talking about reducing benefits for people who never made enough money, no matter how hard they worked, in order to save enough to provide for themselves in their retirement, like people who rely on Social Security, we should make sure that their benefits are safe. They've been promised those benefits, and now they're needing them, but we can't afford to pay six-figure benefits to people who don't need them, including President Trump, who's eligible for Social Security as well. So I would like to respond to a particular proposal that Max shared, because we often hear this is a very politically popular proposal. I mean, I don't consider myself rich. Does anyone in this room consider themselves rich? So when you say just tax the rich, that sounds great. That's someone else, someone else is going to pay for it. But we need to keep in mind, what are we actually talking about when we make all earned income subject to Social Security taxes? Max alluded to it, but didn't really go that far. The reason why there is a cap on the payroll tax is because there's also a cap on benefits. The more than six-figure benefits I talked about, if we taxed people on all their earned income and credited them with additional benefits, if we want to uphold the current program design, we could be paying $200,000 a year or more to some of the wealthiest Americans. I find that excessive, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I don't think that's what the purpose we have in mind when we talk about Social Security. The other point is that if you eliminate the cap, the Social Security Administration has scored that proposal to see what it will get us. It gets us about 5 years of Social Security surpluses, and then we're right back to deficits. So that is not a long-term fix, because we really shouldn't be talking about the trust fund or the 75-year solvency, because we know that Congress doesn't save the money. They spend it right away. Despite the so-called trust fund, we have a $5 trillion debt. We have a $2 trillion annual deficit. And there's a lot of rhetoric about the trust fund, but it doesn't really exist. It's an accounting ledger. If we think of trust fund, don't you think like it's an actual account that has money in it? But when Social Security redeems its IOUs, or government bonds, from the Treasury has to go out and sell bonds in the marketplace. Those Social Security bonds, they're not backed by cash. Treasury has to go out and ask investors to buy our debt so we can fund the Social Security benefits that Congress has promised. And so we really can only count for the 5 years that we get from that change if we eliminate the cap on payroll taxes. But there's also another price we will pay if we make that change. We will pay for it with slower economic growth, because a lot of those individuals who would now face the highest marginal tax rate increase in US history. And if we believe that people will just pay higher taxes and not change their behavior, I have bad news for you, especially people on the higher income end and people who run small businesses. They will change their behavior. They will work fewer hours. They will put their money in other places. They will get creative with their accountants to figure out how they can shield more of their money from taxation. They're not just sitting ducks waiting for us to drain them of their hard-earned wages. And so economists who have looked at these questions have found that it would reduce innovation. That means it would reduce the investments those people make, which would reduce job opportunities, reduce economic growth, and also reduce life-improving and life-saving products and services that we all enjoy. So I just want to point out that whether Max wants to talk about trade-offs or not, life is full of trade-offs. There is no free lunch, and eliminating the payroll tax cap is no different than anything else we face here. I think something else that's important is if we wait until 2033, we're going to have many fewer options to gradually change benefits, to gradually adjust how Social Security works. And we will be put between a rock and a hard place. And the most likely outcome is that Congress will just borrow more money. But 10 years from now, our debt is already projected to be well over 120, 130% of our economy, the debt we've borrowed in credit markets. And Penn Wharton, which is a nonpartisan budget entity associated with that university, their budget model tried to score what would happen to the US budget and our debt and our economy under current projections. They think we have about 15, maybe 20 years at most, and then their model breaks. Like, they can't project a major fiscal crisis, but that's basically what they're projecting, is they're saying at the current pace at which we're spending and borrowing money, their model breaks. It can't handle the inputs anymore. So basically, they're looking at a fiscal crisis. So if we spend all of the, we probably will need to tax people more to pay for Social Security and Medicare. Don't forget about Medicare. Medicare has a much larger funding shortfall than Social Security. If we use all of that tax revenue to shore up Social Security without making any benefit changes, including to those people who are receiving $100,000 or more in benefits, then we're not going to have any money left over for Medicare. Like, life is full of trade-offs, and we need to take those into consideration, and that's why I think we should take a more holistic approach and ask who should get benefits, how much should they receive, and how much can we ask workers to pay for without undermining their economic future.
All right, thank you, Romina. So, yes. I'll let Max reply. I want to make a quick announcement because we are collecting the questions. If anybody from the audience has their question, if you want to hold your card up, the volunteers will come around and grab those while Max.
So just to be clear, I never said there shouldn't be trade-offs. I said we've already had the trade-offs. We've already done delayed cost of living adjustments back in '83. We've already raised the retirement age. And if you want to set up another a meeting on Medicare, I'll be glad to come back, or we can just stay another hour, because that's a whole other thing that is very important and needs to be discussed. Now, Romina asked you all, this is kind of a phony argument in my opinion. How many of you as a couple are getting $117,000 in Social Security benefits? And nobody raised their hand, right? Because there aren't people like that. I mean, that is really, you'd have to really look hard. You've got all these people, a couple hundred people, not one example of that, because they don't exist. And if they do exist, there are very few like that. And the idea of starting to penalize, if you will, higher income Social Security beneficiaries, and it's called changing the program from an earned benefit means testing. That's what this is about. Let's means test the program so that if you end up doing pretty well after paying into Social Security, you should, and this is I think what Cato supports, get less in benefits by the time you get beneficiary. That's means testing. Social Security is not a welfare program. Welfare programs are means tested. And if we want to go down that road, that's going to destroy the Social Security program. All that support that you have around the country, all across the board politically, supporting the program, is because it's an earned benefit. It's not a welfare program. You don't have people supporting welfare programs in this country like you do supporting the Social Security program. So it's not that I don't think that there should be trade-offs. As I said, that has already happened. One other thing that I think should be mentioned, and you talked about Social Security being a social insurance program. What does that mean? If you are a younger person, you have Social Security as insurance. If you are a 27-year-old worker, right now, wage earner with a spouse and two children, you have almost $2 million in value of Social Security disability and life insurance. Now, a lot of younger people don't know that and won't know that until something awful happens in the family, and someone might say, well, you ought to check with Social Security. You've got some benefits there. So that's what social insurance is about. Yes, it's important to retirees. Yes, it's important to have an inflation protector. It's not enough. I think the formula should be changed so that it is accurately reflecting inflation as it affects a beneficiary. But it's there for younger people. Millions of children get by in life because they have Social Security benefits because they had a parent, a working parent, who died young or became disabled. And that's the nature, that's the beauty of this program. And look, we're supposed to be celebrating. I read Romina's post this morning. She posted something. And it was, the very first thing, I have it right here, you commented on this being the 89th anniversary of Social Security. That was the beginning of your post.
Substack?
The
The
80
Dispatch? I recommend you read it. It's free.
And it has a wonderful picture of a rotary phone, okay? And I tell you, Romina, it is offensive to me. Today marks the 89th anniversary of Social Security. Like a stubborn senior, this program has been set in its ways for so long, you could be excused for thinking the Social Security Administration is still using rotary phones. That's the kind of misinformation that I don't think is helpful. And as a stubborn senior, I would say that we are open to changes. We know it's a dynamic program. It has changed a lot since 1934. But change does not mean undermining the system, the value of the program. It means improving it, protecting it. And so, you know, I have to say, if you're going to post something on the 89th anniversary of a program that has fulfilled its commitments every month to millions and millions of people, tens of millions of people, I think it would have been nice to start out by saying happy birthday.
It is living longer than most of us, right? 89 years. So that is a celebration. Okay, so we have a few minutes left before we get to the Q&A from the audience. So I want you each, in about 5 minutes if we can, to talk about how you think there will be some kind of bipartisan consensus to this. And these are the two perfect people to do this. I feel it. So who wants to start on this? Do we give Romina the last word, Max, or do you want Romina to start it off?
You choose, Robyn.
Oh, no. All right. Well, Romina got the first word today, so go ahead, Max, and we'll...
Okay. So, you know, we talk about bipartisan solutions, right? The bills that have been introduced into the House and into the Senate, Congressman John Larson, the top Republican on the House Ways and Means Social Security Committee, Sheldon Whitehouse in the Senate, Sherrod Brown has introduced legislation. Most of that legislation deals with improving the program, and not a single Republican, not one, has signed on to this into this bill. In fact, they haven't signed on to any bills. Why? Why don't they submit legislation? The last time a congressman submitted a bill, he's deceased. He was from Texas, and he was a member of the Ways and Means Committee. And as far as I can tell, his former colleagues are trying to hide his bill because they don't want people to talk about it, because it talks about reducing benefits, reducing the cost of living adjustment, which is already too small, having a formula that makes it even smaller, raising the age for receiving benefits. So has not been a bipartisan approach, but there is bipartisan support for fixing Social Security around the country. And as I said, 75, 85% of people that have been polled over the last few years, all across the political spectrum, not just Democrats, support improving the program, support improving benefits, bringing more revenue into the program. This bipartisan group does not support cutting benefits. So what I say is, when you go out, you're going to have a big election coming up, a lot of members of Congress. I was talking to Jackie, a former state representative, about your political situation here. When you go to these events and you meet a candidate who's running for Congress, and you ask them where they stand on Social Security, you're probably going to get the same thing I get when I meet anybody socially and I tell them what I do. It's always, I'm for that. I'm for that. But that's not good enough. You know, ask them, are you for raising the age for getting benefits, which is lower benefits? The longer you wait, the lower your benefits are going to be over that period of time. Are you for reducing the cost of living adjustment? Are you for expanding Social Security? Are you for improving the benefits, the survivor benefits, the disability benefits? I think if you ask that, you maybe get an answer. I don't know, but the bipartisan support exists in the country. It does not exist in the House of Representatives. It does not exist in the U.S. Senate. Even some fairly modest proposals have not had bipartisan support. So that's what I hope you'll get involved in this election and ask your people that are running for House and Senate and other offices what their position is, and don't accept "I'm for it" as not good enough.
It's like when people answer, "I'm fine," and you know there's something deeper going on, right? Press, ask, educate yourselves. Yeah, that's definitely great advice. So Romina, what would you say? Bipartisan solution, is it possible? How do we even push for it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it can seem very challenging, but it's definitely not impossible to find a bipartisan solution. And there is actually bipartisan support for reforms to Social Security and Medicare in both the House and Senate. It's just a lot of people aren't hearing about it, especially now that we're in this heated election cycle. We held a symposium at the Cato Institute in May of this year, Social Security, a Global Perspective, where we invited experts from countries like Sweden and Germany and Canada and New Zealand to talk about the reforms that they made to their Social Security programs, because Europe is ahead of us when it comes to aging, and so they have had to tackle these problems much sooner than we've had to, and I think we can learn from their approaches. And one of the common things that representatives from these countries mentioned, what was key to making reforms was for politicians to come together and strike a political agreement where they would commit to a constructive and collaborative dialogue. That means avoiding attacking each other's proposals and focusing on shared goals rather than partisan differences, setting aside adversarial tactics like we've been witnessing from President Biden in the State of the Union. We need to create a more positive atmosphere for negotiations, which is essential so we can find common ground. And then this kind of approach where politicians agree to work together instead of running against each other by throwing each other's ideas under the bus, that can then help us to focus on solutions that benefit all Americans, with legislators as partners who together demonstrate goodwill rather than seizing every chance to make their opponent look bad. And I was very encouraged, actually, last fall. There was a lot of momentum in both the House and Senate with the Fiscal Commission Act and the Fiscal Stability Act. They were introduced on a bipartisan basis in both the House and Senate. In January, the House Budget Committee, under the leadership of Jody Arrington, actually passed the Fiscal Commission Act, which is now a mix of the House and Senate approach. So we already have a bill that both chambers can get behind. Unfortunately, an organization called Americans for Tax Reform decided to take the adversarial approach and say that it was just an excuse for Republicans to raise taxes, and so they opposed the Fiscal Commission Act. But the Fiscal Commission Act, all it would have done is put together a bipartisan group of legislators to find solutions to stabilize our debt at no more than the size of our economy, so our debt doesn't grow bigger than our economy, which is one good goal that we could aim for to make sure our debt is sustainable, and that they could look at revenues and that they could look at spending programs. And the other requirement was that any changes to Social Security and Medicare should improve the 75-year long-term solvency. So they also took a long-term perspective. And That bill exists, and it could come up for a vote maybe in November during the lame duck, or maybe during the next Congress and administration. I think it's this kind of approach that we need, where lawmakers come together on a bipartisan basis to find a solution. The other thing I would like to mention is there was also an effort in the Senate. Senator Cassidy, a Republican, and Senator King, a Democrat, have been working for months now together with the Bipartisan Policy Center on a bill. They've been kind of floating some of the proposals in the bill, but they have not introduced the full bill. They were planning to introduce it when President Biden decided to make Social Security and Medicare an election campaign issue, and they withdrew. So it's this kind of, you have lawmakers who want to be bold, who want to be courageous, but they also want to get reelected. So if we're going to solve this, the only way we're going to do this, if we come together on a bipartisan basis and agree to work together instead of attacking each other, because ultimately we are all in this together. Many of you have children, you might have grandchildren, you're probably hoping that they will have children of their own someday. This is not just about the current generation, but this is about today and also the future. Thank you.
Max, go right ahead. It looks like you need...
Let me just clarify.
I was getting the last word.
You were getting the last word.
This is the very last word, maybe.
Yeah.
But this bipartisan commission, yes, there were a couple of Democrats out of 435 members of the House. There were a couple of Democrats who signed on, so it's bipartisan. The Cassidy King that didn't go anywhere. Why didn't it go anywhere? Because a lot of groups, including the National Committee, weighed in, and I think some of the members of that group got cold feet, frankly, and decided not to introduce anything. The commission idea that went through bipartisan through the House, what does it do? It sets up a way to, it's really a way to cut Social Security benefits without anybody having their fingerprints on it, right? It's a commission that will have a short time frame, will make recommendations, that will be rushed through. There won't be an opportunity to go through the regular order of having the committees of jurisdiction, like the Ways and Means Committee, weigh in, having outside witnesses like the National Committee, like Cato. It'll be rushed through, no amendments allowed, we'll pass it quickly, nobody will have their fingerprints on it, and we'll have to suffer politically. So it's not a real thing. It's a way to avoid having making some hard choices, and that's the last word from me.
I would just say that I heard...
I did say Romina could have the last word.
I'm familiar with Max's organization's criticisms of the bill, and I wrote an entire piece on my Debt Dispatch on Substack, which is free, that debunks some of these claims about the commission. It has a public input process. It has to perform its work in a transparent manner. And I think it's funny that Max is worried that they might cut benefits, and the Republicans are worried that they might raise taxes. And so that's why I say we need to come together. We all need to chip in. The most likely political solution will involve a mix of benefit cuts, most likely on upper income earners, and tax increases, probably also on upper income earners. But we will never find that solution if we're not willing to work together and just say, no, we can't go there and we can't go there. Let's talk about what we can get done.
Is Cato for raising taxes?
We're going to move on to the audience questions at this time. I have a feeling you guys have trouble settling with having the last word, right? Like, this is going to be a whole thing.
You have the last word.
Okay, I'll have it. I'll have the first word here in the audience Q&A. Okay, this is a question posed virtually saying, will it truly help me to wait until 70 to receive Social Security versus getting it now at full retirement age? Is that something people should consider?
Yes, I mean, waiting until 70, it's like an 8% relatively risk-free rate of return. If you believe Social Security will be there for the long term, it's the best solution if you can afford to wait and you don't have any health issues. If you expect to die young, then it's probably not the best thing for you. But if you're healthy and can afford to wait, then yeah, try to find an investment that gets you an 8% rare of return.
It's a rare point of agreement here.
There we go. I don't even have to pose it to you. Okay. Then I'll give you this one, Max, another virtual question here. What should we ask our elected officials to keep Social Security intact? Now, you did mention this, the questions you should be posing to your elected officials. State them again so people can write them down, carry them in a note card, keep them in your pocket. If you ever run into one right at the coffee shop, what do you ask them?
Well, it's like you said, it's not just when you ask someone, how are you, and they say fine, and you don't know really what that means. When you ask your candidates for House or Senate about Social Security, you don't just accept, I'm for it. That doesn't mean anything. Ask them, you need to ask them, are you for cutting benefits? What does that mean? Are you for raising the retirement age, which is a cut in benefits? You know, I've heard a lot of candidates, and I've done a lot of political activities around the country, and just this year and for many years. And the way they frame it when they talk about raising the retirement age is, we're not going to raise the retirement age. It won't affect you, anybody in this room. It's going to affect younger workers that are 35 or 40 years old. So that is the kind of the escape valve to that issue. But you have to think about the younger workers. They're going to need Social Security. They're going to need it even more because we're seeing declining defined benefit pensions. People are relying more and more on the Social Security program. So to put that on younger people and to think that they won't even think about it because they've already been brainwashed by Cato into thinking if you think the program isn't going to be there, it's bankrupt. It's not going to be there anyway. And some politician says, well, you're going to have to wait longer. What do you care? You've already decided it's not going to be there anyway, so it's not going to be an important factor in you deciding how to vote. So again, ask all the questions, try to get the answers. Politicians are pretty good at avoiding a direct answer, but I think you have to try.
You have to try. Okay, Romina, we'll move on to you for the next one. Somebody in the audience is asking, why are earned Social Security benefits cut by half if the retiree also worked as a public employee? How can this be corrected? And we're seeing a lot of people nod to this, as this is an issue a lot of people face.
Yeah, this is one of the most confusing aspects of the Social Security program, and we should just get rid of that. Because the way it right now works is like, people think that it acts like a tax, that their benefits are cut in half, but they actually get credit. So they get higher benefits down the road, but people don't realize that. So it's just stupid. It doesn't save us any money, and it just confuses people and discourages them from working. So I think we should just get rid of that. It's called the retirement earnings test. We should get rid of that.
Okay.
Well,
do you agree, Matt?
Well, I'm not sure that was what the question was. Read the question again.
Why are earned benefits cut by half if retiree also worked as a public employee?
Right. Well, this is, the way I understand it, it's not about the earnings test. We already got rid of the earnings test about over 20 years ago, and that was a relic of the Depression era when the government wanted people to get out of the workforce because we had such high unemployment, and there was a penalty if you continue to work while you were getting your Social Security, you lost some of your benefit for every dollar you made. But I think this question is about the
WEP GPO.
The WEP and the GPO, which penalizes people who worked in state government, nurses, and it's not all states, but quite a few states and have pensions that because they have those pensions, the GPO and the WEP penalize those individuals and their spouses. And I agree with you, if that's what you're talking about, that we should get rid of it. And there are proposals that do. I hope that's what you're talking about, so we can have two things we agree on.
Yeah, right, there's still, I did misunderstand it to be the retirement earnings test. For the WEP GPO, I agree we need to change it, but I think it should be fair. There's a proportional proposal instead of just getting rid of it, because what people don't realize sometimes is that Social Security has a very progressive benefit formula where at lower earnings people get higher benefits, And so that's why that WEP GPO was adopted in the first place, to make sure that the bigger benefit didn't necessarily accrue to people who had other income that wasn't considered or taxed by Social Security. It's, again, a very highly complex issues, but there is a fix that is bipartisan and that would make a more proportional adjustment. If we just got rid of it, I think it would still be unfair to other workers.
It is, it's the government pension offset. And that is what a lot of public employees, and I see a lot of heads nodding, the people that are familiar with that, are being penalized. And you're probably right. There's legislation that would go a long way towards fixing it, not eliminate it altogether,
Yep.
but make it more palatable to those kinds of workers.
All right.
Yeah, we need
I
a
love an
technical
agreement.
fix.
Yes, that is fantastic. All right. So another virtual question. Do disability benefits stop, I should say, when an individual reaches full retirement age?
Yeah, I don't know.
And I believe if you collect Social Security, right, you cannot also collect disability
Right.
benefits.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's the question here.
You transition to the program, but I'm not sure if it happens at full retirement age or when it happens. I would need to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll get back to you, virtual viewer. Okay. Is there a reason the employee share of the payroll tax cannot be graduated?
Is there a reason?
Is there a reason? This audience member wants to know.
Right.
The employee share of
The payroll tax. And was this saying
Cannot be
companies
graduated.
pay into that as well as the employee, correct?
Yes.
Into your Social Security
Do you know
portion
what he
that's
means by
taxed.
graduated?
No, I mean, it's a flat amount. It's, I've
Is it a
never
flat
heard of-
percentage
it's a flat
that is
percent.
going in of your rate?
No,
Maybe
it-
they're saying, can it be graduated so the more you earn, that percentage goes up? But you talked about there being a cap on the
Yes.
amount they can be taxed
There
on.
is a cap and on the amount that you pay, and then your employer stops as well at that point.
Yeah.
They
You know,
stop
it could be-
contributing as well,
It could be
okay.
changed. I mean, if the Congress changed that percentage, I don't know of any.
Yeah, it's
proposal.
6.2%
6.2%.
for the employee and the employer. And if you're self-employed, you pay the full amount. However, for the employer portion, you also get a tax deduction on the income tax.
Okay.
So that's important to keep in mind for anyone who's heard President Trump call for eliminating taxation on Social Security benefits. The reason that there are taxes on Social Security benefits is because the employer share was not taxed on the way in. And so in the 70s and then again in the 80s, they added taxes to the Social Security benefits to account for that, because otherwise it was like a windfall. Like it was unfair in terms of the tax system.
And I think Cato opposes President Trump's
This is
proposal
correct.
to eliminate.
We're truly nonpartisan.
Yeah, you know, and you probably heard about that. He wants. How many of you pay taxes on some of your Social Security benefits? Quite, you know, maybe a
Well, and that comes into our next question is actually, why are Social Security benefits taxed?
Oh, great.
So answer that in this kind of reply. That'd be great.
Yes.
Well, Romina explained the reason why there is a tax, and I think it would be when the tax was. You think it happened in the 70s, and when in the early
got
80s,
updated, yeah.
it got up. It was increased, but part of that money, I think, between 50 and 85% goes to the Medicare
That's
Part
right.
A program, which makes the Medicare program sounder in terms of solvency. So, you know, I'm not sure former President Trump really knew what he was talking about when he talked about eliminating that tax, because, again, something Cato and
Yeah.
our organizations agree on.
I maybe would like to add one angle to that tax proposal, which a lot of people are not aware of. Yes, there was sort of the explanation from the tax side, and that holds true. This is a very good explanation. But kind of like sometimes we make decisions and then we make up reasons for our decisions afterwards. That's kind of what happened with this tax on Social Security benefits. The initial reason to adopt this was actually to introduce some means testing into the Social Security program to reduce benefits for higher income earners, but they didn't think they could pass an actual proposal to reduce benefits for higher income earners, so instead they decided to levy a tax on their Social Security benefits to basically claw some of them back if they also had other sources of income. And then they figured out that they could also make a legitimate, rational argument about tax equity. And so that's the story they told. But initially, it was really about how do we reduce benefits for higher income earners, and the tax was one way.
And if you are concerned about the long-term solvency of Social Security, this proposal shortens that by about a year, because you'd have that money goes back into Social Security. So it would shorten the solvency. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, it pays for about 5 cents on the dollar of every benefit right now.
Okay, well, that answers that. I want to pose this one is directly to Romina. You said 2033 was kind of the key date when we would, right, not have solvency in the program. Didn't that get moved to 2035? Why the difference?
For Medicare. It was moved for Medicare. For Social Security, it's still 2033.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go, clarification. And now, could eliminating the COLA component help with solvency, since most pensions provide a flat benefit? So could that be, this is what you get, it is the same amount, there is no cost of living increase?
Well, you want to go? Sure.
Go ahead, Max, yeah.
Sure, you're reducing benefits, you're dealing with adding more years of solvency. But is that the right thing to do? I don't think so. You know, the Social Security benefit is not suffering from generosity, despite what Romina says. It's not suffering from generosity. The COLA, just quickly, the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, back in the mid-'70s, it used to be done by Congress annually, and it was a very political thing. You're going to raise the COLA to get votes. That was not a good idea. So it was a formula that measures inflation from the third quarter, right now, of 1 year, to the third quarter of the following year. And that percentage of inflation is used to announce the COLA. We're going to have an announcement of the COLA probably in about a month. I think it's going to be about 2.6%, pretty low. Yes, if you got rid of the COLA, you'd fall, your check, you'd fall even further behind because of inflation. And even as it is, the COLA is inadequate. I think Cato supports a change in the COLA that would measure it in a way that would reduce the COLA even further, and we oppose that. I think there's something called the CPIE, Consumer Price Index Elderly. And it's a way to measure inflation as it affects the kinds of goods and services that an older person relies on, like health care, puts the appropriate weight on those things that because seniors rely on. After all, the purpose of the COLA is so that your check keeps up with inflation. If the calculation is wrong, it's not achieving that purpose. So the CPIE, just to tell you this, it's an experiment. It has never been applied. It results in a slightly higher COLA every year, which is very small, but it's cumulative, like interest that's compounded. So over time, it makes a big difference. The CPIE, that is an experiment, was passed into law when I was staff director of the U.S. Senate Committee on Aging. And we tried to get a different CPI across the board. We could only do it as an experiment. And so it's been something that has been on the books since 1978. So I worked on that almost, 45 years ago. And I'm hoping we get it adopted besides an experiment across the board, because I don't think I have another 40 years to see it happen.
I would maybe just add that the bill that Max mentioned earlier, Representative Sam Johnson proposed a Social Security reform proposal, and one of the changes would have been to eliminate the COLA for higher income individuals as a way to reduce their benefits.
Okay, all right. Well, the last viewer question we have today is, doesn't insolvency simply mean insufficient revenue rather than no revenue? And I would maybe expand on this in saying that, so is that really a problem of, giant proportions like we talk about it? Is that 17% gap something that, would be a huge issue? Or do we just deal with insufficient funding, right, by the time this gets to that point? Go ahead, Max.
Okay. Well, it's a small, seems like a small percentage, but it's politically, it's a difficult obstacle. But it is important, and I'm glad you, again, reinforced that distinction. That does not mean that there's no funding. It means that there's a shortfall. And there's a big difference between, in people's minds, when they hear the program is bankrupt, it's gone, there's no money there, the government stole the money. There's a big difference between that and hearing there is a shortfall. It's about, if we don't do anything, we wait all the way to 2034 or 2035. It changes a little bit every year. We're gonna have a reduction of 17% in the benefits. That's not acceptable. I don't know a single member of Congress that would want to come back to Ohio, to Columbus, or anywhere and say, yeah, I didn't do my job and your Social Security is going to be cut by 17%. That's not going to happen. But that, in people's minds, it's very important to make the distinction between fixing that shortfall and giving up on the program because it's going to be bankrupt and won't exist at all.
Okay, and your thoughts, Romina, on that?
I think that that discussion is overall misleading because what's important to keep in mind is that current workers pay for current benefits, and we already have a shortfall. Current workers' taxes cover a little over 90% of benefits right now, and that is declining. And so the rest is already made up by borrowing. So really what the date of 2033 is important for understanding is that it gives Social Security the authority to come to Treasury and say, hey, I got this IOU and I need the money now, and then Treasury goes out and borrows the money to pay Social Security back. But it's within the government. It doesn't create any new money. The money wasn't saved. It's not like a pension program or like a trust, an actual real trust fund that has resources in it that can go insolvent. The question we face is how much more do we want to ask workers to pay, and what can we do on the benefit side so we can achieve a better balance between what retirees receive and what workers need to pay, because we have an imbalance right now. And I think I would rather talk about that imbalance and where we can find an equitable solution between workers and retirees, because that's how the program is truly funded on an annual basis. Even when the Treasury borrows to pay back Social Security, that comes from Americans who pay income taxes and payroll taxes, et cetera, today. So it comes back to current workers, fund current benefits, and everything else is just paper moving around.
I could sense the steam coming out of Max's ears with every word.
Let me just ask you, how many of you own or have owned or know someone who owns a government bond? Anybody? So if you follow this logic, you are adding to the federal debt by buying a government bond. It is ridiculous. Yes. It is ridiculous. You are paying in, you are buying a bond just like you are paying into Social Security, and that money is dedicated. It's a dedicated revenue stream. And as I explained earlier, when these bonds, they're rolled over regularly, and interest is paid on them.
But where does the money come from, Max? Tell us, where is the money?
The point isn't really where the money's coming from. The real point, I think, is Cato wants to convince you, I suppose, that if you have a government bond, you're adding to our federal debt. That is not true. And it's not true to blame Social Security. Social Security, it's illegal for Social Security to add to the federal debt. The only way Social Security can pay its benefits is through the payroll tax. It has no borrowing authority. So it's really it's a phony argument. I think it's good to stir people up, but I don't think it's very useful.
All right, well, I will tell you what is useful. Tickets to the Ohio State Buckeye versus Indiana football game, which we are going to give away now. So we're going to end this portion. Romina, Max, I'm going to give you guys a big round of applause.
Thank you.
You have been wonderful.